Welcome to NTD News Today. I'm Chris Beers. Here are today's top stories. War Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is increasing its focus on defending its own interests. He accuses previous administrations after the Cold War of not putting America first in their policies.
Prioritizing our nation's security, freedom, and prosperity, our citizens.
President Trump's newly released national security strategy states the era of mass migration is over. Our guest provides analysis on this and what the strategy says about China. Japan and Australia are calling for calm after a Chinese jet locked radar on Japanese fighters. Japan has lodged a strong protest, and both nations say they will keep a close eye on Chinese military activity. Basic steps that parents can take to nurture resilience in their children and in themselves. Vital Signs' Brendan Fallon shares insights from a pediatrician with a focus on natural and holistic ways to safeguard your child's health. As 2026 approaches, the National Park Service is making changes to its free admission calendar. We have the updates, and a 7-magnitude major earthquake rocking Alaska on Saturday. The tremor reaching all the way to nearby Canada.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
War Secretary Pete Hegseth praises the Trump administration's effort in putting America first in its policies. Hegseth spoke at the annual Reagan National Defense Forum, highlighting similarities between President Trump and former President Reagan. According to Hegseth, after the Cold War, multiple administrations did not put America first in their policies.
Their America Last bipartisan consensus is done. It is finished. Under President Trump's leadership, after decades of disastrous decisions by this nation's self-appointed so-called foreign policy elite, we're once again putting American interests first.
On Friday, President Trump unveiled a national security blueprint in which he describes China as a long-term competitor to the U.S. Hegseth touched on the topic as well. He says Washington isn't aiming to overpower China, but rather defend its own interests.
It's our job to make sure Beijing sees unquestionable U.S. military strength that, if necessary, can back up our national interests. Even as we make clear our peaceful intentions, we insist that, as a Pacific nation ourselves, China respect our long-standing interests in the Indo-Pacific.
He also touched on the issue of America's support for its partners. Hegseth criticizes the fact that previous administrations seem to overly focus on defending partners like Ukraine instead of putting America first.
We will actually, for real, get our allies and partners to step up and do their part. We will no longer tolerate free riding. President Trump has shown the way with his historic leadership that yielded the commitments at NATO's Hague Summit. There, NATO committed to spend 5% of GDP on defense.
The U.S. recently changed its policy on support for Ukraine. Instead of donating weapons directly to Kyiv, Washington now sells them to NATO, which then in turn sends them to Ukraine. President Donald Trump's new national security blueprint states the era of mass migration is over and highlights China as a long-term competitor to the United States. Joining me now to discuss is Kervin Oquin, former lead intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance coordinator for the U.S. Army. Welcome back, Kervin. What, in your view, has been the impact of mass migration on the United States in recent years? Do we have you, Kervin? Sounds like we might not have Kervin, so we will have to come back to that and move on. President Trump has signed a new executive order. It creates task forces at the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission. Their job? Protect competition in the U.S. food supply chain. The task forces will target anti-competitive behavior. That includes price fixing. The order says some foreign-controlled corporations threaten the U.S. food supply. It also notes that several companies have already settled price-fixing cases for tens of millions of dollars. The order directs the U.S. Attorney General and the FTC chair to set up the new teams. A 7-magnitude major earthquake rocking Alaska on Saturday. That's according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The quake was at a depth of over 6 miles. The earthquake struck near Yakutat, a community in southeastern Alaska with a population of over 600. No death or injuries have been reported so far, but the tremor was strongly felt in nearby areas of Alaska and Canada. That's according to Austin Holland, Director of Operations at the Alaska Earthquake Center. Holland told USA Today that he expects there would be many aftershocks in the area in the coming days and weeks, and that there is a very small chance that there could be a large earthquake. Next, Japan and Australia are calling for calm after a tense weekend encounter in the skies with a Chinese military jet. Earlier today, both countries urged restraint following what Japan says was an unsafe radar lock. According to Japan's defense ministry, a Chinese J-15 fighter jet took off from the carrier Liaoning near Okinawa. They say the jet repeatedly locked its radar onto Japanese F-15s on Saturday. First, for about 3 minutes in the afternoon, and again later that evening for around 30 minutes. Here's Japan's defense minister addressing the incident directly.
This radar lock-on exceeded the scope necessary for the safe flight of aircraft and constituted a dangerous act. We deeply regret that such an incident occurred and have lodged a strong protest with the Chinese side, making a stern demand for measures to prevent recurrence.
Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi called the lock-on extremely disappointing, saying Japan will act calmly but resolutely and continue surveillance around its waters and airspace. Australia's defense minister voiced concerns during talks with his Japanese counterpart, saying it expects safe and professional interactions with China. Both sides agreed to boost military cooperation. Japan says its jets were scrambled only to monitor Chinese drills, while China accuses Japan of harassment, saying the exercises were announced beforehand. This comes amid rising tensions over Taiwan after Prime Minister Takaichi suggested Japan could intervene if China acted against the island. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the region, the Philippines says China fired flares at a patrol aircraft in the South China Sea on Saturday. Donald Trump Jr. criticized corruption in Ukraine and suggested Sunday that his father may walk away from the country if it doesn't make peace with Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday that he had a long and substantive phone call with President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Here's more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday he had a long and substantive phone call with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner regarding their push to end Ukraine's war with Russia. Zelensky said on X that they, quote, agreed on the next steps and formats for talks with the United States. Witkoff and Kushner had held 2 days of talks with Ukraine's senior negotiator Rustem Umerov in Miami this week. Both sides called them constructive discussions. Witkoff had been expected to brief Umerov on his meeting in Moscow this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky said he was waiting for Umerov to give him a detailed report in person in Kyiv. This comes as French President Emmanuel Macron said on Saturday he would travel to London on Monday to meet Zelensky as well as British and German leaders to discuss the situation in Ukraine and ongoing negotiations under U.S. mediation. Macron also condemned in the strongest possible terms the strikes that targeted Ukraine Friday night. Zelensky addressed troops and military leaders Saturday on the Day of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Also, he visited a hospital in Kyiv to give out awards to wounded soldiers and medics and thank them for their service.
Coming back to our previous story, President Donald Trump's new national security blueprint states the era of mass migration is over and highlights China as a long-term competitor to the United States. Joining me now to discuss is Kervin Oquin, former lead intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance coordinator for the U.S. Army. Kervin, welcome. It is good to have you back after that. What, in your view, has been the impact of mass migration on the United States in recent years?
Yeah, sorry about that, Chris, and it's so good to see you. Good to be here.
All good.
I would say that it hasn't been the last few years. It's been the last few decades. This has been an issue within the United States, just the freedom of travel across borders, mainly the border, our southern border with Mexico. So my first deployment, if I could just tell a brief story here, my first deployment was to Baghdad, Iraq in 2004. One of the first briefings we got out of Fort Hood, Texas was from the FBI talking about the mass migration of terrorist cells through the Mexican border. That was an issue in 2004. That has not gotten fixed. I honestly, there's a lot you can disagree with the administration, and I think that's healthy to disagree with any administration that is doing the wrong thing. But we have got to secure the border for these specific reasons.
Okay, and Kervin, the strategy goes beyond the United States and hints at the need for other nations to follow suit in ending mass migration. What do you think are the biggest obstacles to Trump's apparent aim of ending mass migration worldwide?
Yeah, I think it's the worldwide part of that, right? Well, while the Trump administration is talking America first and being, very internal about things, trying to project power with that, it's going to be quite difficult. The European nations are going to wonder why they are going to agree to things that the United States wants them to do, and the United States isn't going or says that they're not going to help within Europe anymore. But I think one of the things there is what the Trump administration is trying to do and forcing NATO as a NATO country, forcing other NATO countries to spend that 5% of GDP on defense. I know Germany is working towards that. Other countries are working towards that. But most of NATO is woefully unprepared for what's happening in their borders. And one of the things is that Russia is creeping closer to NATO borders with this war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and we are seeing rising public sentiment in Europe about more secure borders, about pushing back against mass migration there. But the recently released document states, we want to ensure that the Western Hemisphere remains reasonably stable and well-governed enough to prevent and discourage mass migration to the United States. Does this explain the U.S. Navy buildup in the Caribbean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Monroe Doctrine 2.0, right? So this is exactly what's happening in the Caribbean. There, it is a show of force, really. Go back to reading The Art of War. You want to win this battle without ever firing a single munition. Well, we fired quite a few munitions, but have not had many fired back at us in this. And I think that's the projection of power that's being shown here. And it starts with Venezuela, it moves to Colombia, and it shows the Latin American countries that the United States is not going to sit idly by while terrorist organizations, while drug traffickers are able to move at will. And another part of this is, look, China is in Latin America as well, and they have a free flow of movement in Latin America, facilitating this drug movement, specifically fentanyl, into the United States.
Now, my colleague Blanquita Cullum, who used to be on the board of governors for U.S. foreign media in the United States, said that when she was in Venezuela reporting on Chavez, she saw billboards sponsored by the Iranian regime there. What kind of presence do America's adversaries have in South America that could be perhaps deterred by this presence?
Yeah, absolutely right. So we've got it's just like the Axis and the Allies again, right? So Iran is heavy in Latin America. China has a heavy influence in Latin America through their Belt and Road Initiative. Russia is supplying munitions, not as much anymore with their war in Ukraine, but they are providing energy. They're providing intelligence. And so you've got this axis, right, that we're always talking about: Russia, Iran, China, and they are very influential in the Caribbean. Let's not forget that the Panama Canal, both sides of that port, have ports that are owned by Chinese companies, with the golden percent that's owned by the Chinese Communist Party of the CCP. If China would direct those companies to block the Panama Canal, they would do so, and the United States would have a very difficult time traversing this free flow of naval waters.
Kervin, you've created the perfect segue to my next question. A key focus of this national security strategy is China, stating America's economic openness toward China did not influence it toward freedom and neighborliness as the policy had intended. What went wrong?
I'm sorry. I guess I don't understand the question of what went
Oh,
wrong.
it's okay. So what went wrong in the past 30, 40 years with U.S. policy towards China, hoping that, trade would influence China toward neighborliness?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely right. So what went wrong? Let me throw that back onto China. I'll tell you what went wrong. The theft of U.S. intelligence, the theft of naval assets so that they can build their own naval assets, not this free flow of information. No, their aircraft carriers are built as a direct replica of U.S. air carriers because of the engine that was stolen. So China owns the responsibility there. They have not been good stewards of world freedom, and now they're with all of this influx in cash flow in this in the world today. They are trying to prop themselves up as some benevolent global power, which they aren't. They are thieves. The Belt and Road Initiative has showed us that with emerging economies, they are stealing from the rest of the world, namely the African continent and the resources there. They are not providing for the African continent. They're just stealing resources.
Kervin, Trump's China policy is heavily focused on economic reciprocity, seeming to take a sort of live and let live stance, calling China a competitor. But China, of course, seeks overall dominance over the U.S. and the world. What do you make of the tension between these differing positions?
Yeah, it's actually in parallel with what I've seen in the U.S. military and in my time in the Department of War. What I'm saying is that as I started out, I signed up October 16th of 2001. China was seen as a competitor. 10 years into that, they were seen as an adversary. That then became a near peer, and as we stand today, that the U.S. and the U.S. military determines that China is a peer on peer, right? So if we get into a large-scale combat operation, we are dealing with another peer. This is something that we have not faced, since Nazi Germany, right? Not to say one side's Nazis, one side's the free world, but we are in a war that no one has participated in, and we are losing our grandparents and our great grandparents who have fought in those wars to even understand how to win that.
Kervin, just in closing here, overall, how does this national security strategy compare to the same from prior administrations?
I think it's a lot more political for sure, but we know that's how the administration works right now. A heavy emphasis on our borders and staying internal, the America First policy, but heavy-handed towards China, I think. And look, I think there is. I know a lot of the media is running with how Russia is not really mentioned in here. I read through it. You know what Russia is mentioned as? Not even a competitor. Russia is an afterthought, because they showed their hand in the invasion of Ukraine, right? They used to be seen as a near peer to the United States. The United States does not consider them a near peer anymore. And they say, Europe, deal with it. This is on your borders. This is on your continent. You need to deal with it.
Kervin Aucoin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Stay safe out there.
You too. Coming up, the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, according to experts, is not large enough to topple the Venezuelan regime. A Marine Corps veteran and attorney weighs in on the reason for the presence after the break.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
This is Pho-licious. Now, what is pho? It's an authentic Vietnamese noodle dish. Pho-licious chicken pho brings the comforting, aromatic flavors of Vietnam to your bowl. And Mama Thu's signature spice blend. Well, this chicken pho is as close to homemade as it gets without the wait. Some cubed chicken, a little lime, and then the magic moment. See you soon, my friends.
Pho-licious is now available at your local Walmart or walmart.com.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl...
Welcome back. U.S. strikes on alleged drug boats continue, and the debate over a second strike on one such boat remains in the headlines. Here's the latest.
This video, released by the Department of Defense, captures the moment the U.S. first strikes a Venezuelan boat that the U.S. government says was carrying illegal drugs. Since September, the U.S. military has destroyed 23 boats, killing at least 87 people. All say were tied to drug trafficking.
And right now, the world is seeing the strength of American resolve in stemming the flow of lethal drugs to our country. Here, again, we've been focused, and here we've been clear. If you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you.
Some strikes, particularly a second on this same boat, are drawing criticism. In the September 2nd attack, 11 people were reportedly on the boat. After a first strike, 2 survivors were seen clinging to the wreckage, according to some who have seen video of the full attack. Then, more strikes, killing them and sinking the vessel.
Later on, a couple hours later, I was told, hey, there had to be a reattack because there were a couple folks that could still be in the fight. Access to radios, there was a link-up point of another potential boat. Drugs were still there. They were actively interacting with them. Had to take that reattack. I said, Roger, sounds good. From what I understood then and what I understand now, I fully support that strike. There was protocol for dealing with survivors, but in that, and frankly, there was 10 strikes later, there was a semi-submersible that I think folks here, meaning a submarine. You don't go fishing on a submarine full of drugs. And in that particular case, the first strike didn't take it out. And a couple guys jumped off and swam, from what I understand, a ways away. When we struck the submarine a second time, it sunk, and then you had 2 people that you had to go get, and we had the ability to go get them. We gave them back to their host countries. That's a story that's already been out in the public. So we didn't change our protocol. It was just a different circumstance.
Both the House and Senate Armed Services Committees have launched inquiries into what happened.
Next, with a significant part of the U.S. fleet in the Caribbean, we look at the resources deployed and the reason behind their deployment with U.S. Marine Corps veteran and attorney John Deaton. Good to have you on the show, John. John, do we have you? Yes, we do. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations reports the deployment of 12 ships, over 100 aircraft, 10,000 troops, and 6,000 sailors in the Caribbean. Your fellow Marines are among them. What could these forces accomplish tactically in the region?
Well, they could accomplish a lot. It only takes a few Marines, and thank you for having me, to accomplish a lot of things. But I think what this is a lot of perception of the Trump administration, putting pressure on not just the Venezuelan government, but the people, I don't think an invasion is likely. There's too much risk involved. And quite frankly, there's not enough forces for that. So I think what we're seeing is a combination of military might and force coupled with sanctions to effectuate regime change of Maduro.
Now, President Trump reportedly gave Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro an ultimatum to step down. What resources does Venezuela have to resist U.S. pressure?
Well, listen, they only have one resource, and that is oil, and that's a great resource. But when you implement sanctions, not just against Venezuela, but countries that do business with the United States in purchasing that Venezuelan oil, then you're basically choking off the only lifeline that Venezuelan government has, other than their cocaine usage. And that's what people have to understand, that we're talking about a Venezuelan government that is highly corrupt. They're using their military, including Air Force planes, to deliver 250 tons of cocaine per year to the United States. So if you can eliminate both avenues of revenue, oil and cocaine distribution, then you can probably successfully ultimately get Maduro out of there.
What, or do you think that we could see the U.S. put additional pressure on Maduro in some other ways, and what do you think those ways could be?
On other countries to eliminate any business. And what you see Maduro doing right now is cozying up to Russia, China, Hezbollah as backup reinforcements. And so I think that taking sanctions and making sure that now that they've been declared a foreign terrorist organization, you can also, the U.S. Treasury can seize assets, even assets that are being utilized through Russian banks. And I think that's a way to do it.
John, what would a direct conflict with the U.S. and Venezuela actually look like?
Well, again, I think an invasion, listen, there's two options, right? There's this invasion that Maduro keeps talking about. He keeps saying that the United States is going to invade Venezuela, and he's got all kinds of forces, including civilians and drug cartel members, entrenched in bunkers ready to defend that. But I think that's highly unlikely. It's too risky. And quite frankly, you would need more than 10,000 troops to successfully, in my opinion, invade. I don't think President Trump's going to do that. There'd be too many people in his own party that would be upset at that. That's contradictory to what he did. So I think what we're seeing is just a massive way of choking off any income. And if you choke them out financially, eventually it's going to cause internal pressure, maybe people inside his own military, to basically take Maduro out or force him out.
Now, as I was just talking about with my previous guest, Kervin Oakwin, America's adversaries do have a significant presence in South America. China cozying up to socialist leaders, Russia, levying resources there. So obviously, this buildup of the Navy in the Caribbean is quite a bit larger than what's needed to take out a few drug boats. So, what kind of influence could this presence have on actors that the U.S. might not exactly want to have a presence in South America?
Well, and I think that's what you're seeing play out when I said that Maduro is cozying up to Hezbollah, Iran, Russia. He's trying to see, basically what type of backup reinforcements that he could have. Can he turn those, U.S. adversaries into his allies? But I think there's so much talk about an invasion. Listen, you and your previous guests were talking about mass migration. And if there was an invasion into Venezuela, it would create millions of refugees that would, be flooding other parts of the world. And I just don't think that that's going to happen. So I think we're going to continue to see limited strikes. Now, there's a difference, but not just taking out the boats that are coming, but you could see drone strikes and others of cartel members who are inside the military government, who are part of the cartel and this narco operations. That's really state-run narco operations. I think we're going to see maybe some of that, increased sanctions. And I think, within a year, 6 months, maybe Maduro will probably be asking for a way out.
Yeah, and it does seem like we're in a new age of military activity with drones and the Ukraine-Russia war, and with pagers exploding in Lebanon. There's a lot of different resources that could be leveraged, I imagine, that we don't even know about. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier this year negotiated a deal with Panama securing passage for U.S. military vessels, just to jog your memory here. How important was that move in retrospect, given this buildup?
Very important. Listen, we're talking about, America. We have America First agenda, but we are a global economy. As you see, every aspect of our economy is impacted by our ability to move products across the globe. And so keeping passage to those, strategic areas are not just for military reasons, it's for also for economic reasons. So it was an important move to make, and I think Secretary Rubio is doing a good job at that.
John, before we go, how does the increased U.S. military presence in South America fit into Trump's broader national security strategy that was recently released?
Well, I think that what we're seeing play out in South America is really President Trump's war on terror, meaning the drug cartels. One of his promises was that he would stop the drug infiltration. We've lost 1 million Americans to fentanyl deaths and overdoses. There's an epidemic in the country. And so I think it's more about the drug issue in America than it is anything else. And I think that's something that all people should support. Now, whether you support every individual strike on every individual boat is another thing. There are going to be all kinds of, inquiries made. And if the House flips in the midterms, we're going to see investigations into Pete Hegseth and all of that. Politics are going to get in the way, but we need to protect Americans at all costs, in my opinion.
All right, John Deaton, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, basic steps that parents can take to nurture resilience in their children and in themselves. Vital Signs' Brendan Fallon shares insights from a pediatrician with a focus on natural and holistic ways to safeguard children's health when we come back.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents. Now my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning, and then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. I love you. Now my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the material things, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious minute or moment.
Say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
I was a quarterback at Hardaway High School. College first-round draft pick, on and off the field. We were taught to not show any signs of weakness. During the football season, I would stop eating. But I didn't know I was depressed. I thought that something was wrong with me. For 20 plus years was physical. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father, as a man, and as a husband. Put the importance on your mental health. I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. The first tool is therapy. The second one is positive self-talk. And then journaling, putting your thoughts on paper. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
Welcome back to NTD. I'm joined in studio by health correspondent and host of Vital Signs, Brendan Fallon. Vital Signs offers natural and nutritional ways of optimizing our health. Brendan, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Chris.
What do you have for us?
Today, I want to talk about this idea of resilience. And I spoke to this pediatrician. He's an integrative pediatrician, which means he's looking at like natural ways and holistic ways alongside medicine to nurture kids' health. And I asked him this question, my idea of resilience, I remember from Rocky VI that Sylvester Stallone says something like, it's not about how hard you can get hit, it's about how hard you get hit and still get back up again. And Dr. Warsh kind of confirmed this is along the lines of what resilience is about. And I wanted to get his tips on, in the modern age where perhaps it's there's not so much opportunity to get out there and have adventures, and there's this whole cyber environment that kids are pushed into. How can they still nurture the kind of resilience that was possibly easier 40 years ago?
All right, let's watch what he had to say.
There are new challenges, and I think we have to face those as we come. And that goes back to kind of the first question of, you have to trust your intuition, because there's no guidebook for the new problems that come. If we have, new issues with screens or things that are changing, you have to do what makes sense. And sometimes you just have to go back to basics and be like, well, our kids need to be outside. They need to be playing. So I have to figure out how to make that happen. And that obviously depends on where you live, and your situation is going to be different for everybody. Some people live in the inner city. Some people live in more rural areas. So it's easier for some people and not as easy for others. But also, if you prioritize it, there are a lot of parents that are saying, well, okay, look, I think these things are important. You got to go to college, and these are the most important things. We need all these extracurriculars, and maybe I don't believe in that as much anymore. So I'm going to move somewhere more rural. I'm going to move back with my family. I'm going to move to an area where they have schools, that there's more outdoor play. I mean, these are things that some parents prioritize, and it just comes back to what you prioritize. I don't think it's wrong or right. I just think that we have to acknowledge that these things are important, and we're always important in our health. And we are seeing such a chronic disease epidemic that we have to, I think, take a pause and say, okay, what are the things that we're doing much better from 100 years ago? And what are some of the things that we've changed? And obviously, we're living longer than we did hundreds of years ago. So not everything we've done in modern medicine and health is bad. We're living past 40, but we are seeing life expectancy go back down a little bit. We're seeing chronic disease rates go up. So some of the things that we've done in the last few decades obviously is not the best for our long-term health, and certainly for chronic disease. And I would say that one of those big things is movement. And we have traded movement for screens, and we've traded outdoor time for indoor time, and we traded walking for being in a car, and there are pluses and minuses to everything, but we've moved so far towards convenience that we've lost the necessity of movement and sweating and detoxification, which these things are important. The sunlight is important for our health. Our vitamin D is important.
Well, I know that I have had my fair share of outdoor resilience building activity, maybe a little bit too much when I was younger.
Yeah, I remember you'd be running around the neighborhood. I'd be BMXing around. I'd meet some kid one day. He'd become my best friend for the day. He'd be getting into scraps with kids from the other school. It was an adventure. It was a little bit dangerous, but it was you learning life lessons in that time. And there seems to be more of a concern among parents these days about things like child predators. I don't know if it's necessarily any worse than it was 40 years back, but maybe media has kind of put that message out there, and there is more concern about that kind of thing these days.
Yeah, and I mean, the social media environment, online environment, it's so easy to get access to people. So who do you really know who's accessing your children? And then, in a digital world, if that's where your children are playing in a digital world, can they really experience those bumps and bruises that force them to innately build resilience?
That's one of the questions I asked him. In this current climate that is so technically driven, can we still replicate the kind of challenges, the kind of character building that we had back for younger generations? And like what he spoke about in that last sound clip, it's parents kind of deciding what they want to prioritize. And in some cases, they might have the opportunity to move to a rural area where there are more of those kind of opportunities. One thing he really emphasizes, though, is building resilience. Parents, if they want to build resilience in their children, they kind of need to nurture it in themselves. And that's looking after their own mental health, getting the sleep they need, eating the right foods. Because I think many parents know they don't get too far trying to dictate things to their children, but if they can model that behavior, then they've got some chance of it being followed.
Yeah, and he spoke about that, right?
That's right. That's what he's talking about in this next clip.
Okay, let's watch.
Our stress levels are seen by our kids, and they kind of take that in. So I think, yeah, you have to focus on yourself too. One thing that parents are very commonly not so great at is focusing on themselves, right? I mean, it's important to focus on your kids, but also the most important thing you can do for them is to take care of yourself too. And, you know, if you're always stressed, if you're nervous, if you need to support yourself, like, you need to do that. If you need to get therapy, go get therapy. If you aren't eating healthy, I think we got to be eating healthy. We have to model these things. You can't expect your kid who's 8 to go out in nature and go on hikes without you, right? Like, it's not going to happen. You got to do it too. So you have to show them, you know, you reading labels. You have to show them caring about health. You have to show them caring about mental health. Like, these are things that are modeled and that you foster over time, not over one day. But I think as a family, it can be built. And our goal, of course, is not to force them to do these things, is to teach them why they're useful and helpful, so that way they do them themselves in their life moving forward. And I do have hope, and I am encouraged that health is back in the conversation. I mean, it became political. I don't think it's political, but I'm glad that it was this year, because I think that's brought it to the forefront, and people are talking about our health again and where we are in terms of our chronic disease. And you don't have to agree with, everything RFK says, or everything the HHS says, or everything the CDC says. You don't have to agree with everything. But I think that at least the mere fact that we're talking about it is a good thing. And I want it on the top of people's minds, because it has to be. We are now in a world that does not care about your health in any way. It cares about money. And corporations don't care about your health at all. And that's okay. Their job is to make money. So we have to remember that and then build health back into our world.
It's kind of like being a manager, right? Like, how can you expect certain, behaviors from your employees if you yourself don't embody them?
Exactly. And kids are intelligent, and it's a different culture. It's a different generation. I think this is what parents may struggle with these days, is that it's not the kind of, there's so much information out there about how to parent, right? Like, there's tough parenting, there's gentle parenting, there's finding something in between. But what works for someone else isn't necessarily going to work for you. So what he really talks about is kind of nurturing your own intuition as a parent, and trusting in the idea that parents have been doing this for so long, for so many generations, since time began. So you can trust yourself, you can trust your instincts, and you may just get it right.
Yeah, you got this.
You got this.
All right, Brendan Fallon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
To see that full Vital Signs interview with Dr. Warsh, just go to your web browser and enter ept.ms/tough-kids. Coming up, as 2026 approaches, the National Park Service is making changes to its free admission calendar. More news after this break.
That truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
This is Pho-licious. Now, what is pho? It's an authentic Vietnamese noodle dish. The Pho-licious chicken pho brings the comforting, aromatic flavors of Vietnam to your bowl. And Mama Thu's signature spice blend. Well, this chicken pho is as close to homemade as it gets without the wait. Some cubed chicken, a little lime, and then the magic moment. See you soon, my friends.
Pho-licious is now available at your local Walmart or walmart.com.
As we naturally age, many people are getting zero amount of this incredible and unique substance. That's when we start seeing an impact in our joints, skin, nails, and even our digestion.
People ask me, Dr. X, what is the #1 supplement I should be taking? My answer is multi-collagen protein.
People's reactions to me, people were like, what are you doing? What is going on? You look amazing. You have a glow about you.
What makes Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen stand out from other brands? 10 types of collagen. It's grass-fed, pasture-raised with vitamin C and probiotics. It's proven to reduce joint discomfort rapidly, continuously, and persistently. It improves the appearance of crow's feet after 4 weeks and improves skin tone after 8 weeks. And it promotes hair thickness, growth, and a reduction in hair breakage.
It has transformed everything from my hair. Like, my hair was starting to kind of just, come out, and I don't have that anymore. My skin feels amazing.
Call the number on your screen and find out how to get a free bottle when you order, plus free shipping and our 30-day money-back guarantee. And as a bonus, we will include Dr. Josh Axe and Jordan Rubin's revolutionary book, Multi-Collagen Makeover, free with your order, plus free shipping and free returns.
I have implicit trust in Dr. Axe because the plan worked. I'm living proof of it.
This is the collagen protein that is backed by clinical studies. It's what my family uses, it's what I use, and I know you're gonna benefit in a big way as well.
Love the results or get your money back. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Call the number on your screen or go online now.
Welcome back. I'm Chris Beers. The National Park Service will offer free admission to U.S. residents on President Donald Trump's birthday, June 14th next year, which also happens to be Flag Day. There will be higher admission for fees for international visitors. The new free admission policy takes effect January 1st. Here's more.
According to the agency's website, Martin Luther King Jr. Day as well as Juneteenth are no longer listed as free admission days. Several days were added, including September 17th, which is Constitution Day, and June 14th, which is Flag Day. Other free admission days next year include President's Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day weekend, the Park Service's 110th birthday, Theodore Roosevelt's birthday, and Veterans Day. The free admissions will only apply to U.S. citizens and residents.
The IRS has published its annual inflation adjustments for more than 60 tax provisions for the 2026 tax year. What does that mean for you and your family? My colleagues Stephania and Carrie talked with Lawrence Sprung, the founder of Midland Financial and author of Financial Planning Made Personal.
Let's start with the main changes that people should know about.
Yeah, so I think that the things that people need to be aware of is starting in 2026, we've seen adjustments in the standard deduction. We've seen the income brackets broaden out, and we've seen the highest tax bracket stay the same as at 37%. So I think the important thing for people to know and understand is be aware of what the brackets are, what the standard deductions are for 2026, and start planning now. Don't wait till December 2026 to start planning this, or even April 2027 when you're looking to file your returns. Get started now and have some plan in place for that.
And with those changes, maybe you can go a level deeper on what's new, especially as it relates to credits and benefits.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest changes that's going to affect people, and this was not an IRS thing, this was a Secure Act 2.0 thing. This is a big change for people. People who are over the age of 50, who are contributing and maxing out their 401ks, if they earned over $150,000 in 2025, their catch-up provision, because there are two components to the 401k contribution, the employee deferral, and then if you're over 50, the catch-up. If you're over that 150 in 2025, that catch-up's gonna have to go into a Roth component, not the traditional. That's one of the biggest changes that a lot of people don't realize is taking place as of January 1 that I really think they need to be aware of.
And what's that implication of having to devote it to a Roth versus other, portfolio opportunities?
Yeah, so that $8,000 that would be the catch-up provision can't go in pre-tax, it has to go in post-tax. So it's a way for the government to get more tax revenue. But in essence, I would say this, it's not a bad thing because we're seeing a lot of families who are putting away money pre-tax very heavily, and then when they end up in retirement, all the money that they're pulling out is taxable. So by forcing them to put in after-tax money that's going to grow and be tax-free in retirement, it's really setting them up, I think, to be in a better position too.
And let's dig in a little deeper on the changes to the thresholds for middle income earners to start with.
Yeah, so what's happening is, and without going into every bracket, really it's just expanded those numbers in a way that they've raised up those limits. So essentially, at the end of the day, those middle income earners, if their situation stays the same, they should be at the same, or if not less taxable income in 2026. So it's really setting them up in a way, because the IRS is increasing those brackets because of inflation and the hope that people's incomes are also increasing as well.
And so we're kind of going into a funny position here, because most people are not thinking about 2027. They're thinking about what they have to do right now to sort their 2025 filings. But what should they prepare for the following year? What pitfalls might they encounter that if they just have an ounce of prevention now, it's going to make their life easier on the back end?
Yeah, I think taxes end up being something that people just do in the rearview mirror, right? So like we're talking about 2025 now. Yeah. Come January, people are going to start getting their documents together and looking backwards as to what happened. And then their accountant or CPA is going to say, hey, this is what you owe, or this is what you're getting back. And it's very reactive, based upon what happened. So what we're trying to do is just educate people and say, hey, we know it's not 2026 yet. These changes are coming into place. Don't think of this the same way that you thought about it all along. Go into it with a game plan. And what I would also suggest is don't wait the whole year to check it again, right? If you put a game plan together now for 2026, maybe in June or July when you're halfway through the year, take a look and see where you line up with those brackets. Are there things that you might be missing out on? Should you be thinking about standard deduction versus itemizing? Are there opportunities for you to lower your tax base? Think about that proactively instead of just letting the tax situation happen to you over time.
Yeah, and to that point, people oftentimes forget that they're spending out of pocket for things, but that can actually reduce their taxable income. So they need a strategy for that, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things, you look at like FSAs and HSAs. HSA is probably one of the most underutilized tools available.
For health spending.
Yeah.
You're buying whatever you buy at the pharmacy, you're not even thinking about it.
And it's triple tax free, because you're putting it in tax deferred, it's growing tax free, and then you're taking it out and not paying any taxes on it either. So it's a huge benefit, and we all need Advil, Tylenol, contacts, Band-Aids. Even just those staples are HSA eligible items that you could be using those tax-free monies to be paying for.
Okay, so for people who might be thinking about selling stocks or rental property next year, will these changes impact them?
Yeah, so what you have to look at is you want to, capital gains, which is what you're talking about, selling assets like that. You want to look at, those are preferential treatment in terms of taxes. So you're not paying at ordinary income rates. You're paying anywhere between 0 to 20%. And where you are in that range is really dependent upon what your income is for the year. So there may be ways for you to reduce your income and reduce your capital gains exposure. And then during the year, you want to look for opportunities if there are dips in the market. Like in 2025 during Liberation Day, we saw a dip in the market. That could have been an opportunity for people to sell stocks at a loss or sell assets at a loss, maybe even rebuy them 30, 31 days later and take that loss and use it against some of their gains this year. So you have to be a little bit more strategic. Don't just wait to look at your assets in December and see what your gains are and what your losses are. It's something that should be constantly looked at throughout the year.
It's interesting because you're a financial planner helping people grow their wealth. And then the accountants say, what works in our office is the opposite of what works in the wealth advisor's office. So because of course you want to minimize your income as much as possible when claiming what should be taxable. So what kind of strategies do you generally have for people to sort of balance what is kind of a strange irony in that regard?
Yeah, so we work hand in hand with families and their accountants, because most of the things that we're advising families on have some sort of tax implication, right? Whenever you're looking at monies and dollars, there's tax implications. So we're working very closely with them to ensure that we're on the same page. So there are certain things like this time of year, we've had some families that have had some significant gains throughout the year. So we're looking again for opportunities to take losses that we might be able to achieve and lower their tax liability. But it is important that, and I think you bring up a good point, that, your accountant shouldn't be over here and your financial advisor over here and they never talk or interact. They should be a cohesive unit and working in your best interest, and that's something we coordinate each and every day for the families we work with.
And that strategy.
That's all for today's news. Thank you for tuning in. Stay with us for NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific.